Sports Talk Radio.
Hey. And we back.
We back.
Pits and Push Sports Talk Radio is going down. This is your outside episode edition. It's special. That y'all know y'all got us outside, so y'all know it's something of not the norm.
Special episode.
Definitely going to enjoy it. How you been, man?
I've been good, man. It's good to be back out here, man. My man been holding it down while I've been doing my thing. We both doing good, man. Like we blessed. Things is moving for us, and let's keep the train moving, bro.
Hey, say less. And actually, a lot of you may not know, but before we do so, it's something that we seldomly do, right? So for any of your Pits and Push comments or anything of our videos, pictures, etc., find it on YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, and then also you catch the audios on Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio. Everywhere that you go to find and to look for your needs, you can find us. But we have a special announcement, man. Yes. Shout out to Staples Stores, for their sponsorship for Pits and Push Sports Talk Radio. Anybody who has been to the Staples on 301 here in Maryland has expressed to us the excitement and the shock from when they walk in. As soon as you walk in the store, all you see is Pits and Push. So shout out to Staples Stores. We're gonna play a little snippet of our conversation with them and our appreciation for them for what they did for us. Pits and Push Sports Talk Radio. I'm here with Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much for this opportunity.
My pleasure.
Deeply and gratefully appreciative of this.
It's been great working with you. You've been awesome. So I can't wait to see all the things we can do for you and your organization. So we're so happy that you trusted us to partner with the state.
Absolutely. And not only that, we're definitely going to make sure we take this with us. And social media is one of our biggest avenues. So it'll be a lot of posting on all our websites, social sites. If you can, though, can you give a little bit more information about the opportunity that we were able to announce with you guys and the brands you sponsor?
This Staples partners with local businesses. So each Staples location has a business that's local in the area that kind of supports that area, and wanted to showcase their business through signage, letting them know what kind of signage we can provide and advertise for businesses. So probably the best one in the whole area, so we're excited with that.
No, and just for emphasis purposes. So, have you got any reviews or anything from the customers walking in?
Yep. So we have had a lot of positive feedback. They love your design. A lot of talk about what is Pits and Push and wherever we go, and then I direct them to where you are on Instagram and things like that. So.
What's going on, everybody? The day is here. I am.
Yes.
Shout out to Staples again, man.
Thank you.
So for all your print needs,
posters,
yard signs,
printouts.
Listen, Staples is where you need to be. That's where you need to go. They're reasonable pricing.
Hey, tell them Pits and Push
sent you. Now, with further ado, for our special episode today, listen, y'all know we talk about sports a lot, and with that there comes injuries. But with this particular injury, it has an effect on the entire body. Right. When you talk about the brain.
Right.
And today we have a special guest. We have Dr. Kelli. We're gonna go ahead and bring Dr. Kelli to the stage with us. Dr. Kelli, how you doing today?
How you doing, Doc?
I am good. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
So, Doc, if you can you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. My name is Dr. Kelli. I am a medical speech language pathologist, and I own a private telepractice. So I get to go all across the country and sometimes the world from my office, where I get to work with and treat adults and older people, so grandmas and grandpas and older aunts and uncles, whenever they have any kind of stroke or traumatic brain injury or dementia, Parkinson's disease. And currently I'm seeing an influx in my practice for long COVID brain fog. but also working with people who have concussions and traumatic brain injuries who get them from sports, like what we'll talk about today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If somebody, may be dealing with that and may require some of your services, where could they find you at?
So if they're looking for services for speech therapy, then they can find me at my website, Serenity Speech Therapy. That is the website, or that is the name of my private practice, Serenity Speech Therapy. But if they have consultation questions about if they think they may be experiencing signs and symptoms of a concussion or traumatic brain injury, and they're not sure if they may need speech therapy services, then they can come and see me through Kensington Academy, which is a consulting firm that I own, where they can come and ask questions and may not need, routine therapy, but they can maybe share some of the symptoms that they're experiencing, and I can refer or give some recommendations for exercises on how they can help. And they can do that through Instagram at Dr Kelli, DrKelli .medical SLP, or they can follow at Brain Talk Foundation. And Kensington Academy has a page on Instagram, Kensington Academy LLC.
And before we get to the next question, one of our viewers on Instagram,
yes,
says, Dr. Kelly, welcome to the greatest podcast in the world. Shout out to Larry.
Hey, thank you, man.
Shout out to Larry.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
That's our guy, Larry from Bowie State University.
All right.
I appreciate you, Larry. He's always been a supporter, man.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for the welcome, Larry.
And also, I'll be remiss also to shout out Head to Speech.
Yeah.
Head to Speech was the connection to us meeting you, Dr. Kelly.
Right.
Connecting link.
That was the connecting link for us getting together. So shout out to Dr. Pope and Head to Speech, and for everything that they're doing and the pathway that they're leading as well when it comes to the same topic that we're talking about today.
Shout out to Wellness and those guys over there.
Absolutely.
As well.
So I think one of the things, if we can, because we did the social media plug, but I think it'd be a good segue if we can just start from the bottom, right? If you can describe, or if you can explain, what is a concussion? Like, because a lot of people may literally take it in a different way. Can you break that down, what that actually means? What is a concussion scientifically?
Sure. A concussion is any kind of bump or blow or jolt that the brain experiences. So that can be from sports, it can be from a car accident, which is how you hear people say that, they got into a fender bender and may have had a concussion. People in the military experience it. So a lot of people think, head-to-head collision or something that actually happens to the head, but it can be if you're, shoved too hard and, your neck snaps back. And so the brain is not fixed to the skull. And so it sits in fluid and it slushes around. So I like to use this egg analogy whenever I describe concussions and brain injuries. The brain is equivalent to an egg. So if you think of a raw egg inside of a shell, the shell is hard like the brain, the skull. And if you take a raw egg and you're shaking it, then that yolk inside is moving around. And so the same thing happens with the brain. If you're, taking a push or any kind of blow to the head, if it's actually to the head. And so the brain moves the exact same way. So getting kind of nerdy here, but if you take Newton's third law of motion, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you have, your brain pressing and hitting up against that skull, it's going to have that same force and it's going to hit the back of the head as well, which means you could end up with two different kinds of injuries. But a concussion is bumps or blows, any kind of jolt to the head that gets the brain to jostle around inside of the skull.
Okay.
Because with it being in the brain, is it diagnosed the severity of a concussion? Is it something easy? Oh, it's a mild. Oh, this is severe. Like, how can you tell which is which?
That is a really, really good question. So in the past, it has been categorized as a mild TBI, or a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, it's just a concussion. But now we are moving away from that because it is very subjective. How can you tell what a mild TBI is? Because something that could be classified as mild a kiddo or a young adult or an older adult could end up, experiencing symptoms from that for 2 years, which means that's not really mild. That's more severe than what we think. So we are really getting away from the mild categorization of concussions and are looking at it wholly and looking at it more longitudinally and seeing, okay, if you're having an issue now, we need to keep track of what's going on and then monitor you as you continue to develop.
And when you talk about the severe and mild, and when we talk about football players, we'll start there, right? And you take a player who maybe has had say about 4 or 5. I know we're taking away mild and severe. He's had lower grade concussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you have a player who's had a severe concussion, but only has had one.
Yes.
Is there a difference in those two cases? Because on one hand, you have a person who may only experience one, but then you have another player who experiences them a lot, but not as severe.
Yes. So with concussions, you said about 5 or 6 concussions. 3 concussions equals 1 traumatic brain injury. So if you're saying 5 or 6, that means that one player has experienced 2 traumatic brain injuries. And given the level of how athletes report, and they may hide and change, cheat protocols, all those things, they could be causing more damage, especially if they're not being assessed and they're not being treated to help with the cognitive deficits that they may be experiencing. And then if you do experience, a different athlete who's had one really bad injury, it could be, instantly a traumatic brain injury and not classified as a concussion. But I always say every patient is different. Every concussion is different. Every brain injury is different. There are people who can be on the field and experience, hit after hit and not really have, too much that phases them. And then there could be one who takes 2 hits and they're out for the season. But there is something called second impact syndrome that a lot of people don't know about, and it can be very deadly. And that is where you have 2 concussions, and it doesn't matter how severe or how mild they are. You could have a very severe traumatic, a severe concussion. And then if you go back and play and cheat the protocols and you get back out on the field before you're ready and before that concussion has had time to heal, and you get a second one, and it could be something as simple as your helmet hitting the turf and you getting a very mild concussion. SIS or second impact syndrome can cause a death. It also can severely cause deficits for cognition. So memory, executive functioning, and we can talk about all that stuff later. But
and those are the effects. Yeah. Those are the effects that I wanted to and I don't think we're jumping too much when it comes to the effects. But can you talk about the effects that having such an injury may have, even if it's not, you may not experience it immediately, but something that may come long term?
Yes. Quickly, so there's a primary and secondary injury that you can have when you're thinking about brain injuries. Primary is when it happens right then and there. So if you get your lights are knocked out on the field and you stand up and you start to wobble, or you have a hard time with your speech, there's your proof of your injury right there. But a secondary injury could happen over the course of hours, months, several days. And so with that, you can see things like what I was saying. So their motor function could change. So the gait of their walk could change. They could have a difficult time with memory. So how do you remember plays? How do you remember what time practice is? How do you remember homework? So executive functioning, like I just mentioned, those are things that you have to do, that you need to function every day. So it can be something as simple as sequencing. So, how many steps does it take to take the toothpaste top off of the toothpaste, put your toothpaste on, and then put it back? For people who have their brains injured, something like that could be a very debilitating feat, and they could actually need help with that. Also with word finding. So, having a hard time expressing themselves. Also emotional issues, impulsivity. So with emotion, they could, the slightest little thing could trigger them and cause a very, very drastic reaction that typically may not have been warranted. A lot of times partners or children of people who have experienced these kind of issues, even parents say like, this is not like you, or there's something that's going on. This isn't right. And so those are the kinds of things for you to keep an eye out for. And this is why it's so important for coaches to be aware of this so they can keep an eye out, parents, educators, so teachers, college professors. I really want referees to be informed because they're right there with the kiddos and, you know, young athletes, professional athletes on the fields, and they get to see and hear how bad these hits are. And so if people are educated and have the knowledge to say, then we can save some brains and save some lives, I think.
Absolutely. So if a coach might think that one of their players has a concussion, what are some of the probing questions they need to ask to figure out what might be going on?
Well, I would recommend baseline information be taken at the beginning of the season. So if your organization has a protocol, then putting that into place. Protocols are not perfect, but it's better than nothing. I would also recommend talking with their primary care physicians and then asking for a speech language pathology referral. So a lot of medical doctors may not refer to a speech therapist because, as a lot of listeners and viewers may be realizing, like, oh, this field really exists and it's actually dedicated to a part of the field is actually dedicated to brain rehabilitation, strengthening and improving. And if doctors are not aware of that specific niche of our field, then they're not going to refer, which is unfortunately what has really happened. So a lot of doctors know about speech therapy for, you know, helping kiddos with R's and lisps and stuttering and things like that. But the medical side of it is not as well known. And that means a disconnect for a lot of athletes and other people who could benefit from this kind of service.
I have actually, I'm a pass a question to Push with him being a coach. And, you know, the era that we grew up in playing football, right? The era that we grew up in, right? And just think of all of the hits that I gave you.
Oh,
right?
my goodness.
I mean,
oh my gosh.
Hey, I knew he was going to bring it up. We used to battle as little kids. But I know where he's going with this. But, like, I could vividly remember as playing in Little League where either we ran somebody over, I hit somebody.
Yeah, you get that
flash. You get that
flash.
you get that white flash.
Yeah.
You get up, your coach be like, man, get back in there. You good.
Not only that, they smack us in the head.
Like, good job.
Get back in
you know what I mean? Get back in there. I'm like, whoa, now that I think about it, like, yo, that could have been like a little concussion. Like, and that happened to me, I know, more than 3 times.
Yeah, me as well.
In Little League. So
how do you going from, so my question to you is, right, so the era that we played in, right, no shade to this era now. It was, I say it was a little tougher. This era is a lot smarter.
Yeah.
We were, I feel, more tougher back then, right? Because we played through a lot of that.
Right.
But
we
it wasn't smart enough to play through it. How do you turn on that competitor you from everything that you did and went through and still battled and balled to now, not only as a parent for a kid playing, but also as a coach and recognizing that this isn't okay?
Well, it ain't.
Especially when it's your star player.
Right. Well, at the end of the day, it ain't about football, man. It's about their health, their livelihood, and having them playing a safe game, right? So something that won't affect them down the long run. They can still play the game and be smart and not do the stuff that we did. Like the information wasn't out there for us about concussions and things like that. Now it is now. You know what I mean? They got studies now that show concussions do this, and that. Maybe Dr. Kelli can expunge on the impacts of long-term concussion issues. But I feel like if the information is out there, we need to apply what's being put out there. We got to protect the kids at all costs, man.
And I think that, and I'm glad you said that, because I think that while there are some institutions, youth institutions that protect the kids, but I do think there are some institutions that are win more now than safety of the kids. Definitely. And that's why I asked that, because I see a lot of it, you know, and it's like, okay, that's not safe, but it's their star player. They need him out there to win. So they do at all costs what's necessary. So Dr. Kelly, as he said, if you can expound on the long-term effects that it may have, but then also, as I remember, as he said, when we get knocked out, like they used to give us smelly salt too.
Yeah.
They used to give us the smelly salt. But when we were children, we were sent to sleep when we had a headache after a hard hit. And now I'm hearing that they saying you ain't supposed to go to sleep. So what is the correct formula in that? And then if you can expound on long-term effects.
So with the recommendations that doctors typically give, you are correct. You will hear stay in the dark, get lots of rest, stay off of your devices, and then return to play in a week or so. So in that time, we're actually potentially losing precious time for checking cognition and starting to rehabilitate those things that may have been shocked or traumatized. Okay. So with long-term effects, right now, the big push is how young we should start playing young athletes with physical connecting sports, contact sports. And yes, contact sports. And so the age, they're looking at the age of 14 as being where young people should be able to start playing. But that is because studies are showing that with CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, they're showing that young people in their teens are dying from this, but you cannot get diagnosed with CTE until after you have died. So the teenagers that are proving that CTE is existing in these young people's brains, unfortunately, are already dead. And so that means, and also with CTE, it takes years to accumulate. So if you take a really bad hit, that does not mean tomorrow you're going to have CTE. If you start showing signs of CTE, that means that you have had it for years, even decades, and the damage was done years in advance. So if there's a 17-year-old, which is somebody that I saw, which is the age of a young person I saw in a study, a 17-year-old boy was diagnosed with CTE after death, which means he had to have been either in Pee-wee or something before the age of 17 for him to start experiencing those signs and symptoms. So long term, if we're looking at 17, there are people who play their entire lives. And so the actual player who CTE was discovered in, he was, they said that his brain was the equivalent of having suffered 25,000 car accidents over his 25-year career, because he played in high school, he played in college, and then he played 17 years in the NFL. And the condition of his brain at the time of death was that of someone who had suffered 25,000 car accidents. So with that, you say long-term effects. With that, he did have the brain of someone who was equivalent to being in their 80s with dementia. And that is what a lot of the brains of athletes who have CTE show. But I also want to say, it's not just football. Everybody hears CTE and it's like football. Other sports are at risk for this as well.
Any contact sport, right? Pretty much.
Which is be a contact sport though, from what it sounds like, right? It could be a fall.
Yeah.
It could be a constant fall.
And it can be a fall, but the CTE risk is the repeated head trauma.
Okay.
I've spoken with athletes who play tennis who have talked about a concussion, but if they're not repeatedly taking a hit in that way, their risk is significantly less.
Okay. So like boxing, UFC, stuff like that.
Yes. Hockey, basketball, baseball, volleyball, wrestling, yes.
So how do you feel about youth in contact sports, Doc, personally?
Yes. Very good question. Good question. I actually love it. I love sports. I was a journalism major in college, and I even, interned at ESPN up in Bristol, nice. Connecticut. I love sports. I am a big football fan, but it's tough to love it so much and also know what's on the other side of it, and to know what is happening under the helmet, or behind the mask. And at that point, it kind of takes a little bit of the fun out of it, because I'm like, how much is my entertainment, worth for what these players are sacrificing on the field and on the court every day and every practice? Yeah.
So, they're making leeways with the what they call them, the soft shell you put over the helmets now. They're trying to do things to alleviate the guardian caps. They're doing things now to try to alleviate it, but it's just rough, man, because football, everybody loves it. Boxing, that stuff ain't going nowhere, right? We just got to find ways to be, smarter about it, right, Doc?
That's right. That's right. But with the helmet that you were just mentioning, so think about that egg analogy. Even if you take a raw egg in the shell and you wrap 100 feet of bubble wrap around it, if you're shaking it and I toss it to you, and whether you catch it or drop it, is the yolk still going to be moving inside no matter what you're putting around it? So protocols, it's a very good. What is it?
No, go ahead. I'm gonna say it when you finish.
I'm saying it's very good that athletic associations and organizations are taking this seriously and putting things into play, but it's also very important to consider what's still happening underneath the helmet.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. When you give that analogy, and I'm glad you brought that back up, and you take the egg and you have the shell, even if you have a double shell, at the end of the day, the yolk is still hitting against a shell. So regardless of what is on the exterior, it's still not protecting the interior of the brain from the frontal lobe or from the back lobe of your head. So no matter how many layers you put on it, the contact is still happening.
You got it.
So is there really a safe way to play football?
That's a good question. So that is what the protocols need to be updated for. So and also having the specialists like myself and other medical speech language pathologists included in these conversations, because this is by no means a anti-sports. I mean, I love sports. This is more so get the information and raise your awareness and your knowledge so that you know how to play safely. There are ways to, to use pads and, ways to fall and all of that. Also, it can discourage the use of helmets because, it's, frowned upon, but there are still helmet to helmet collisions intentionally on the field. But when there is education and knowledge, then people know better and then they get to do better. And I think it's very important for parents and coaches to be aware, because when the athletes are excited and they're like, put me in, coach, the athletes and the coaches and the parents are going to have to know better so that they can do better. Because if a 17-year-old is out playing on the field and he, ends up with a really bad concussion, there could be a set of parents that take him to a friend who's a doctor and they say, put him back in, state is coming up. And so those kinds of things happen all the time. But if the parents were to know this concussion is not healed and this second concussion for state could paralyze or, be fatal for your child, they may think differently. They may decide, well, we'll just go ahead and hold off and keep him resting.
And you can, I'll let you touch on that part. I wanted to actually still come back to the egg analogy, honestly, because I think for me, like, because I play football, right? And I think of all of the ways that I've either been tackled, all of the ways that I've hit someone, or more importantly than both of them two, all of the ways that I failed. There were many occasions where I may have failed and the momentum of my lower body hit first, which then takes a lot of speed and force in the upper body, where now my head is hitting the back of the ground. I'll bring up Tua, the quarterback from the Miami Dolphins. He had those concussions back to back, but the one that really struck more severe than the others was when he was thrown down and the back of his head hit the ground. And it still goes to that. So it's like we can tell players to take your head out of a tackle, or you can tell players, not to hit high. But Okay, what happens when you hit that turf?
Yeah, still ground.
What happens when you hit that grass? You know, if you can't protect yourself 100% in football. And I agree with it. Like I love football wholeheartedly, but I think that is one of those things where me as a football fan at heart, and then also a previous football player, is really saying like, well, how do you really protect yourself in a game where your head is going to hit regardless?
Yes.
Because I listen to a lot of fans, and Push knows this about me. I find it very irritating when it's people that have never played a sport, a contact sport, and have all of the answers, and they're telling you all of the things that you can do with your body, and they're completely wrong.
Yes.
It'd be these moments, and I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad you gave the analogy you gave, because at the end of the day, there's a risk regardless.
Yes. Yes. You've got it. You're hitting the nail on the head.
So where I wanted to go, Dr. Kelly, if you had to make one statement to parents or coaches about concussions, what would that be, and why would that be your statement to them?
Okay. One statement. I would say educate yourselves about the risk and the protocols for whatever sport that your child wants to play. And I say that because when I give my talks, they're, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. There's so much information to pack into and to share that I want, all of athletes and parents and I want everybody to know this information, but it's so much. So the statement I would say is to do your research, find out the risks for the sport. If it's a high risk, then educate yourself so that you can do what you can to minimize those risks. But just educate yourselves, educate.
For parents, and then I guess adults as well who play the sport, is there a way that maybe, maybe a daily self-check, or a daily, mental check that can be done, I know there's, I'm just throwing anything against the wall that may stick, just to say, you know what, when you say there's never too many protocols, there's never too many precautions, right? So maybe a precaution for kids such as Push, whose son plays football, right? And that after each practice, there's like a test, a cognitive test that they can do with their children.
So there are protocols for different age groups that you can look up. Some organizations will have them available. I know that large organizations like NCAA, they have their own protocols. But as for a self-check, so with speech therapy, that's our job, is to give an assessment. I always say it's a map of your brain for me, so I can see where you may be having some difficulties. And that is why speech therapists should be a part of the process, because when we see, instead of listing 15 animals, you listed 7, for us, that's a red flag that we need to be working on strengthening your word finding ability. And when I ask a patient, when you're talking, do you ever feel like it's right on the tip of your tongue and you just can't get to it? And a lot of times they're like, yes, boom. Okay, that correlates with the word finding difficulties. If it's memory, if it's sequencing, having a hard time. And also, multiple steps. A lot of times coaches will rattle off multiple directions, but how many times are you counting the steps in a direction? But if someone has a brain injury, a concussion, that could be really hard. And then there's the coach athlete relationship. It's like that coach has to see that, so that they're not, being hard on an athlete and being like, you're slacking, what's wrong with you? And it's like, they could be trying to figure out, okay, what was after go suit up? What comes after that?
Right. And that's the thing. And that goes back to what Pitch was talking about. Like we can't coach the kids how we got coached, right? We got to change.
Yes.
Right. We got to be smarter. We got to understand what's happening, and we got to be proactive about it.
Yes.
That's what a good coach to me is now. Even though my coaches back in the day were great. Were great guys. I still talk to them to this day. but we can't take that, I guess,
that
mentality
yeah,
in the days now with these kids, especially knowing about concussion, CTE, and all that. That's all. We just got to be better. You got to be a better coach. You got to be more attentive. You got to be more aware. And like you said, you got to research and know these things. If you're a coach, you got to know the symptoms of a concussion, right? You got to watch podcasts like this with Dr. Kelly. You got to be diligent. Like a coach is just not a coach. You got kids to look after as well, right? You got to take care of them. The parents is entrusting you with everything. That's their kid. You got to take care of them kids, right? But that's all. I just wanted to rant real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I think that's the difference between, you know, a really good coach and someone who could use a little coaching, perhaps. But I don't think that it's really fair for us to even be able to compare. I think, you know, yesteryear and today is apples and oranges, because, like you said, there wasn't, you know, information on this. There wasn't, you know, even CTE we didn't even know that it existed. You know, in boxing, they used to call it being punch drunk. So these signs have been around for years and years, but we did not know. And so the love that your coaches poured into you and what you all were doing, playing with each other, and, you know, I guess headbutting
Wilkinsburg, and
yeah, that's what you were doing.
Dr. Kelly, you can't say you can't say yeah to that point. You can't say yeah to that point, because that was not a fact. The fact finder said that was false.
They won one game. They won one game.
It's false. It's false. But we have to do. But now that we know better, we get to do better. So you all get to pave the way for that.
Yep.
So you mentioned something earlier. Kind of want to transition there to wrap up. You mentioned the effects that they also have on dementia. Can you expound on that, please?
Yes. So the symptoms can liken to dementia or get categorized as dementia. So dementia is an umbrella term, which, you know, there's Alzheimer's that's under there. There's frontal temporal dementia, which is what Wendy Williams has and Bruce Willis has. And so with dementia, you can have signs of it and then be diagnosed with it. But dementia is essentially parts of the brain slowly dying. And so with speech therapy, it's our job to help create new neural pathways and try to slow the process, because dementia is progressive, which means that when you're eating, when you're sleeping, when you're hanging out, the dementia is working on breaking down parts of the brain. But with CTE, you just never know which parts of the brain are being affected. The way that Dr. Bennett Amalu described CTE was if you have a kitchen sink and you were to take wet cement and pour it down the kitchen pipe, and when it dries, if you flip on water, is there a chance that water is going to be able to pass through that cement in that pipe? It's not. And so if that is the brain, then the blood that needs to get to those parts of the brain that control our emotion and help us with memory and make sure that our vision is good, if those parts of the brain are choked off from the blood that they need, then they do start to die. And that is how it likens to dementia when you're talking about long-term effects such as CTE.
And this topic, more so, is a heavy topic for Push, because his grandmother passed away from it, and as a family member, to deal with those effects and to see them, I think one of the things that he wanted to talk about was not only the effects that it has on the family, on the actual patient, but also the effects that it has on the family. And is there anything that family members can do, as such as yourself, that can help try to create those different neural pathways, as you alluded to earlier, to kind of help and kind of, as much as they can possibly, because as you said, it's a very attacking, so it's going to attack. So is there anything that family members can do that can kind of segue as well when you're not there, or when other speech pathologists are not there, that they can continue those practices going? So
with speech therapy, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm sorry, Doc. It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay. I deal with a lot of patients' families, so this is a really good question. So with a speech therapist working with someone who has dementia, part of the person's treatment plan will be to include education, things that can help carry over. So exercises, especially things that can help the family cope. I would say that if you do know or you're seeing signs of a loved one who may be showing signs of dementia, or, you know, finding keys in the refrigerator, and a lot of times there can be masking, which is where they will basically try to play it off as something different, like, oh, you know, I'm pretty good for my age, or oh, I'd, you know, lose my head if it wasn't attached to my body, or something like that. Those kinds of things are very witty and very clever, and especially because on the family side, a lot of family don't want to consider that their loved one could be, you know, diagnosed with something this scary. And so it is common for family members to ignore, just kind of, well, you know, that's grandma, that's how pop is, and, you know, just let it be. And I would encourage to get them evaluated and get under the care of a speech therapist, because we can slow it down and we can buy you more time, and we can provide you with education, such as what to avoid, what questions to ask, different ways to engage them. So with dementia, there could be things that irritate a loved one that didn't irritate them before, and a speech therapist can help you navigate how to continue to interact with your loved one and it still be pleasant. And it could be letting them call you the wrong name instead of being upset that they're not getting your name right. You're trying to let them, you know, no, it's me. And, you know, to decrease frustration, sometimes you just let them, I'm going to just let you call me Jenny. That's okay. And you love on them, and you will be Jenny, but you know the bond and the love that you have for that person. And speech therapy helps with all of that, you know, with the carryover and making the connections. And when the speech therapist is not in the room, what to do in those instances. I run my private practice very hands-on. So I always tell my the families of my clients that I work with, if you need me, call me, text me. If you have questions or anything, reach out. So get yourself a speech therapist like that, and you will be good to go.
Awesome. We thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for this time. We thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Great show.
And I know you ran off your the ways that they can contact you earlier in the show. But yes, if you can, before we log off, if you can just give them the information on how they can contact you again, please.
Absolutely. You can contact me on Instagram at Dr. Kelli. That's DrKelli.medical SLP. And follow at Brain Talk Foundation. It's a newer page, so we would love you to follow and see what we've got going on. I'm going to all different kinds of AAU teams and organizations and giving talks. So if you would like for me to come and give one of my talks, then you can contact me via email, CORE21 INC@outlook.com. And if you're interested in consultative services where you just may have a question, maybe not looking for treatment, then you can reach out at Kensington Academy, LLC.
And we thank you very much, Dr. Kelli, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I hope that this helped somebody. That is the goal.
It does.
It does. You helped me.
Right.
You helped me with that.
Good.
And I think that this is a large conversation. So this is just a pebble in that pond.
We would definitely love to have you back.
We would definitely love to have you back, but also maybe we could do it on a larger scale, like we can do like a panel discussion about it, and maybe have some student athletes there as well, so it can be more personable.
I would love that. Yes.
Awesome. Well, we thank you very much for joining us. You already know what it is. It's your boys, Pits and Push Sports Talk Radio. Listen, shout out again to Staples stores. Go get your Staples needs. Any of your print needs, go to Staples.
Tell them Pits and Push sent you. Thanks for tuning in to the special episode. Watch it 10 times.